Hello, welcome to this event, this online event, this webinar. This is titled Online Debate, Is the EU Doing Enough on AI? Framing European Policies Influencing Global Competition and Future Scenarios. I would like to especially thank today all the panelists that are going to participate in this debate: Lorena Jaume Palasí, Michela Milano, Andrea Rendi, Eric Badiquet, and Carles Sierra. This event is organized, this online debate is organized by the Catalan delegation to the EU together with the Center for Contemporary Affairs. And we decided to organize this debate because we truly believe artificial intelligence is called to be a driver for the necessary change to overcome the challenges and transitions that our societies are facing in Europe, but all over the world. In fact, digital technologies are transforming the world. We are already aware today in this pandemic crisis, and the artificial intelligence could and should probably lead to structural changes to profound economic, social, and political consequences. All over the world, there are being developed strategies and approaches to tackle the risk and also to harness the opportunities of AI, because we are aware that it raises ethical, legal, and economic concerns. In Catalonia, we have also developed an AI strategy to strengthen the Catalan ecosystem on IA, to prioritize its use in different sectors: health, education, mobility, public services. Also, we envisage the creation of a center of innovation in data tech and AI, an ethics observatory on AI to reinforce also the role of the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, and many other actions. But all this strategy, all these actions, they only have sense if they contribute, if they fit in with an European AI strategy, and to bring the European Union and Europe at the forefront at a global level. In this event today, we want to contribute then, we want to reinforce the capacity to build common visions at EU level, to strengthen the European AI ecosystem, to contribute to an European strategy that puts also the European fundamental values and all the individual and collective rights and freedoms at the core of this strategy. In conclusion, today, and given the impact that the artificial intelligence will have in all the years to come, we want to contribute to an EU leading role at global level. So thanks again for joining today this event. We hope we will have a very fruitful debate, and we will be able altogether to set next steps to reinforce the European project through artificial intelligence. You will be able to participate and join the discussion on Twitter using the hashtag EU on AI, and also in the live chat of the YouTube channel. You can see now the slide. And just to continue with the introduction, now I leave the floor to Pere Almeda, who's the director of the Center for Contemporary Affairs. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Marichey. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Pere Almeda, director of the Center for Contemporary Studies, the in-house think tank of the Catalan government devoted to global challenges and contemporary debates. I want to first thank Marichey Serret and the Catalan delegation to the European Union for all their support. This is the second event organized together so far this year. This debate was planned to be hosted in Brussels, but because the coronavirus crisis, we decided to go online. We were certain on not missing the opportunity to hear the high-level experts that accepted to participate today. And I want to especially thank to all of them for their kind interest and all the collaboration that have shown. We are very happy with all the panelists' profiles that we'll be hearing today. And I'm sure they will provide a very interesting and thoughtful debate about the European artificial intelligence strategy. We are also very satisfied, let me say, because we have more than 400 people that registered to follow this event today. Finally, I also want to thank Ramon López de Mantaras and Carlas Sierra. Carlas will be moderating today's debate. And both of them have coordinated together our special issue on artificial intelligence in our online magazine, Ideas. With more than 20 articles from different authors and perspectives, we analyze in depth the growing impact of artificial intelligence in many areas of human activity. I invite you all to check Ideas and read all the articles there. Now you can see the website on the screen and the contents of this special issue. As we say in our editorial, we are living a kind of a gold rush on artificial intelligence in terms of expectations, but also because of the huge investments on many artificial intelligence industries and fields, big corporations, and the proliferations of many institutions and research centers on artificial intelligence all over the world. We, as citizens, can also see the impact of artificial intelligence in our everyday life. So we can say that the debate around artificial intelligence is one of the paradigms of our time. The way that this technology will evolve will define and shape the world that we'll be living. So to better understand the risk of AI deployment, come up with legal frameworks, codes of conduct, and value-based design methodologies, we want to contribute with this debate from a European perspective. Everyone is aware of the strong competition among world powers to dominate artificial intelligence technology developments. Between the rising power of China artificial intelligence technology related very much to social control, and on the other side, the US leading corporation and its innovation related to military aims, as European citizens, we are all very concerned to promote artificial intelligence for good and with an ethical background to support it. We need so to debate calmly about the European role and the need to regulate and promote a strong European artificial intelligence strategy and also a European ecosystem. An ecosystem that will respond to our democratic values and to all the challenges that we have in these troubling times. We hope that this debate will help all the audience to have an informed and critical position and will empower European institutions to engage and lead a strong and democratic, again, European strategy on artificial intelligence. So thank you everyone for being here today and following us. And now, Carlas, the floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this online panel addressing the question. I hope you are seeing me. Addressing the question of whether the EU is doing enough on artificial intelligence. I thank the Ideas Journal and the Catalan delegation in Brussels, in particular to Meritxell Serret, for organizing this event. Today we had to be physically in Brussels, but for obvious reason, as was mentioned before, we had to change the format of the debate. I hope it works fine. On the positive side, we have people in Singapore and Australia in the audience that otherwise would have not possibly attended the debate. The question addressed by this panel is of a strategic importance for the future of Europe and the world. Artificial intelligence is a global phenomenon that is changing and will change even more our lives, and that has triggered a plethora of initiatives in many countries. Indeed, different regions, states, and organizations across the world have identified AI as one of their strategic focus for the next decade. In the US, after an apparent lack of activity during 2017 and 2018, in 2019, it has witnessed a new impulse from the US government. 6 national AI institutes will be created to support several AI strategic lines. These lines have been identified by the scientific community at different meetings convened since 2016. China, already mentioned, another extremely dynamic country in artificial intelligence, recently announced plans to become the leading country in AI, in particular with the Science and Technology Innovation 2030 initiative of the Chinese government, which strongly focuses on AI technologies, as well as the New Generation Artificial Intelligence Development Plan, whose goals are to seize the major strategic opportunities for the development of AI, to create Chinese first mover advantage, and to accelerate the transformation of China into an innovative country and a leading power of science and technology in the world. I'd like to stress the important focus of these Chinese initiatives in education. Not just large countries are unfolding their strategies. Also small countries, already mentioned, like Catalonia, whose office in Brussels is virtually hosting us, are positioning themselves in the global picture. The Catalan government bases its strategy on strengthening its academic and industrial ecosystem with important research groups like the Artificial Intelligence Research Institute I belong to, and more than 1,300 dynamic startups on the ICT sector employing over 14,000 people to try and position Catalonia as one of the main Southern European hubs on AI. The UK, France, Spain, New Zealand, Australia, every government is in alert mode with respect to the development of AI. They all propose strategies that are rather similar, raising awareness on ethical threats, acknowledging the essential role of AI in public services, and responding to the need to promote research and education. We will talk about research during the panel. Now let me just give a few notes on education. The role that AI can play in education is a fundamental aspect of the impact of AI in our society. It is a major element in the Chinese strategy, as mentioned before, and an essential part of some countries' AI strategies, like in the case of Finland. How to educate children and citizens in AI is key for the acceptance of the technology and to prepare citizens with tools that will allow them to have a critical position with respect to the development of the technology. I'd like to stress the importance of the recent Beijing Declaration on AI and Education, happened in May 2019, with the participation of representatives from more than 100 states. A consensus was reached on asking governments to prepare the next workforce generation with the values and skills for life and work that are most relevant in the AI era. To ensure AI technologies are used to empower teachers rather than replace them, and develop appropriate capacity building programs for teachers to work alongside AI systems. To promote equitable and inclusive use of AI irrespective of disability, social or economic status, ethnic or cultural background, or geographical location, with a strong emphasis on gender equality, as well as to ensure ethical, transparent, and auditable uses of educational data, among many other recommendations. The role of education in the preparation of our society for the AI integration in our lives is a fundamental cornerstone in public policies, regulations, and funding strategies. Many other areas are already benefiting from the application of AI, including city management, transport, safety, and citizen participation. We don't have time in this panel to touch upon all of them, unfortunately. The current crisis, already mentioned as well, has enabled a positive move in the deployment of AI technologies to try and help in its solution. Interestingly enough, accelerating the international collaboration. For instance, between the Chinese company Baidu and the Oregon State University for the prediction of the secondary structure of the RNA sequence of COVID-19. Other players are bringing in their expertise in AI and data analytics, like DeepMind, and the big American companies are offering their computing power. Everybody is setting to help. The world we are entering into will boost an increasing interaction of people with all sorts of AI-based devices, many of them autonomous. This poses important social and ethical challenges. For instance, the ethical implications of the concept of autonomy has put at the center of the discussion the banning of autonomous lethal weapons, also known as killer robots. This banning has the strong opposition of major states like China and the USA. The United Nations, on the other hand, is participating in the debate, and the European Union will need to position itself in this heated controversy. And in many others, as the scientific community is leaning towards a human-centered development of AI, as promoted by several of the recently funded research networks on artificial intelligence. Ethics will be at the center of AI deployment in the next decade. Until recently, around 2018, the European Union, similarly to the US, was not especially active in addressing the challenges of AI. Events accelerated since then. Last year, for instance, the EU set up a group of experts to discuss the ethical implications of the technology, the high-level expert group on AI, that provided a large number of recommendations, some of them aligned with the already mentioned Beijing Declaration on AI in Education. In February 2020, a white paper on artificial intelligence, subtitled "A European Approach to Excellence and Trust," was released. Promises of multi-billion investments have been announced by different politicians. Things seem to move fast, but is the EU really doing enough on AI? We have an outstanding group of panelists to try and answer this question. I'll ask them to give their view on a number of facets of the question for 7 minutes. Then they will debate for a while before opening the discussion and introducing some of your questions. We would like to encourage your participation at the question and answering phase of the debate. If you wish to join the discussion, you can tweet to @ideas_cat and @Catalonia_EU using the hashtag #EUOnAI. You can also share your questions and comments through the through the chat in the YouTube live stream. Try and make short questions so we can address as many as possible. Let's start. Our first panelist is Lorena Jaume Palazzi. She is founder and executive director of the Ethical Tech Society in Germany, an expert on philosophy of law. Thanks for joining us, Lorena. I have a couple of questions for you. First, your stance with respect to AI and society is that AI is becoming a new infrastructure that is altering social relationships. I think this is a very interesting perspective. Can you argue on the importance of this vision? Is Europe understanding it, planning for it? Second, is Europe addressing the importance of the relationship between social values, ethics, and artificial intelligence? That is Europe guaranteeing the democratic governance of these, according to your infrastructure? The floor is yours, Lorena.
Thank you very much, Carlos, and hello to everybody, and thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to be part of this conversation and look very much forward to the next hour. Yes, when we try to talk about something that is as futuristically seen as artificial intelligence, it makes sense to also look back and try to find analogies to what we have and contextualize it in a broader historical overview. And indeed, I do think that there are a lot of commonalities of the properties of, I'm not comfortable when we talk about AI, I'd rather say algorithmic systems, because I think it's a very much culturally loaded term. But when we look about the properties of algorithmic systems, there is a lot in common with the concept of infrastructure. when we talk about infrastructure, we talk about either hard infrastructure like the bridges and the streets, things that are that follow the logic of physics and that are hard, but permit mobility and permit the liquidity and the flexibility of everything that happens in there. So the bridges permit mobility. The streets are hard infrastructure, but are there to make the possibility of people to flow and people, so to say, to be able to go from A to B or transport information from A to B when it comes to telecommunications infrastructure, things of the like. And on the other side, we have what we call social infrastructure, which is the schools, the cemeteries, the laws that we have that follow other type of logics. Those are the logics of the social and the logics of the legal systems that we've built. And all those infrastructures are called infrastructure because they escalate. So they are meant to be applied to a society. And if there are mistakes, they escalate big. This means that the problems within an infrastructure do not affect one person, but a whole collective of people. And they operate and are legitimated and created based on averages, which means that they are based on assumptions about the social and assumptions about what type of different profiles we have in society. So, for instance, the lights, the traffic lights in the streets, they operate based on the assumption of what is the average time that a person would need to go from this part of the road to the other side of the road, and what as a passer. So that is based on a specific average, and this has an impact because, of course, this average will not be able to cover all profiles in a society. So something as simple as the green lights in a city, based on the average time that someone needs to cross one street, might pose a problem for older people because they fall out of this average. For instance, just to put an example, or might fall or might lead to problems to people with some sort of disability, walking disability, that might fall out of that average. And the same applies for our social infrastructure. We create categories, and within those categories, it's always an artificial moment, and it's all about what we think that most profiles do. Same applies with AI. AI, it's very much about averages. The technology, the mathematics of AI are very much based on these statistical assumptions of the current AI that we're displaying. The current algorithmic systems that we're using are very much based on these assumptions about averages. And in other words, to put it very simple, AI does not understand, algorithmic systems do not understand individuals. They are about understanding different profiles. They are about giving an overview about societies or collectives. And that's a very interesting place to be in, because historically the whole conversations about the politics of society at the beginnings of the 20th century were co-opted by engineers who, by proposing models of infrastructure as engineers that would help to distribute access to supplies, access to the city, possibilities of mobility, but also access to social services, they purported that they were creating the politics of the state without being political, because the way they were building things were based on efficiency and rationality. And that turned in 20 to 40 years later, turned into a controversy, because sociologists started to make the point that infrastructure is more, and the assumptions we create in infrastructure are more than just simply numbers and efficiency, and that efficiency is not a value. So there is a social dimension to what is it that you are making things efficient for. And the interesting thing, or the friction, comes when we try to look at how we regulate in societies. What is the democratic DNA of law? And the democratic law systematics that we have are individual. So they are in the systematic that they use, in the dogmatic that they have, based on putting the individual at its center. So the way you enforce and ask for redress legally, it's all about individual methodologies. And this means that we on one side have a technology that does not understand individuals on one side, and at the other side we have a law systematic that does not understand collectives on the other side, but only individuals. And there comes a big friction there, because actually our law systematic tries to understand the woods by regulating the single trees. And we know that the woods are much more than the sum of its trees, that it is about a whole ecosystem, and that you're going to have to acknowledge as an expert the whole ecosystem of the woods to really get a hold on it. If you only focus on every single tree, you're going to have a problem on the long term. So what I want to say with this is that we actually, because of our law dogmatic in Europe, we do not have the methodologies to address this type of issues. Although, and there comes the European Union, we do have a very short but already existing tradition of regulating infrastructure. An interesting thing there in that place in the European Union is what it is entangled in what we call the spatial planning frameworks that we have in this continent, where we basically give societal values that need to guide the principles under which we create infrastructure in societies. And that's really interesting, because the types of values that are specified in there are not individual values, are not about individual freedoms, but are about things like social cohesion or plurality or sustainability. And that's an interesting place to be, but that place that we have already in the European Union is not being used for the discussion about AI. The discussions that we're having about AI right now are purely based on the individualistic systematics that we have. And we see the frictions right now when in times of a pandemic, where we have on the one side collective values and collective usages that are needed on the one side, and on the other side, individual values and individual freedoms, which might be all at stake. So are we doing enough? We could do more.
Thank you very much, Lorena. Very interesting point of view. We'll go back to it for sure after everybody speaks. So the next speaker is Michela Milano. She is Vice President of EURAI, which is the academic organization of AI research in Europe. She is professor and director of the Alma Mater Research Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence. Thanks for joining us, Michela.
Thank you, Carles.
Is the current governance organization of the European AI community good enough for the current uproar of the field and to interact meaningfully with the European Union? What is the role of the EURAI Association? What improvements should be made to AI organization, to AI governance? What collaboration strategies among research centers are being established? Are they good enough? Are we doing enough? The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Carles, for inviting me here. Thank you to the Catalan delegation. So I would like to give you then an overview of what I think of from the point of view of an AI researchers and as a deputy president of EURAI, which is a scientific association. So I will cover mainly the research part. So first of all, let me say that AI research in Europe has really a long-lasting tradition. We have achieved notable results, like, for example, just to give you some example, like Prolog has been defined in Europe, Semantic Web was born here, and even deep learning originated in Europe. So we have, I mean, a long tradition. The first ICAI conference, for example, dates back to 1974. It was organized in Brighton. And EURAI is, one scientific association that is counting 4,500 members in 30 countries. So indeed, the position of Europe is a position of excellence in research, but in the past, we have witnessed like instability of funding in the AI. For example, in the last 10 to 20 years, the Commission has basically funded research on robotics, research on cognitive science, but there was no broad coverage of AI techniques in general. So now things are changing. Of course, we are now trying to devise strategies. And basically in Europe, there are two phenomena. One is a bottom-up initiatives, and one is instead a top-down strategy for funding. So concerning the bottom-up initiatives, we have notably CLAIRE, that has a broad AI perspective, ELLIS, which is focused mainly on machine learning. But basically, the purpose of these bottom-up initiatives is that they are trying to put together AI researchers around some disciplines, and they aim to reduce the fragmentation of the AI research landscape, which, by the way, is indeed was very fragmented and is very fragmented. So on the other side, also the Commission has set up a strategy and it started funding a number of initiatives, and this time on the broad AI perspective. So, for example, just to name a few of them, which is not, I don't want to be exhaustive here, but it's not exhaustively, but just to mention some. We have the AI on demand platform and follow-up calls that are open now. We have 4 networks of excellence that have been funded right now, and they are in the process of signing the grant agreement. There is also preparatory actions for private-public partnership that is under preparation in the current days. And basically, all these initiatives, both the bottom-up and the top-down, so are trying to go along with the guidelines proposed by the high-level expert group for defining trustworthy AI systems, okay? So, to my opinion is that this strategy is itself very well designed, but I think that there are a number of pitfalls that may endanger the overall result, and really we should be aware of. So first of all, the fragmentation of AI research landscape. So this is really not solved. So all these initiatives are very good by themselves, but I think that there's not enough interaction, at least up to now. So I hope that in the future it will improve, and collaboration among AI related initiatives. So we really have to think that if we go alone, every single initiative goes alone, we cannot really achieve the critical mass, we cannot really foster the use of AI broadly. So the coordination and interaction among initiatives is essential. The second pitfall is that the alignment between basic research, what I call curiosity-driven research, and applied industrial research, for the moment, for me, is totally missing. So we have industries that are going, they're doing industrial research, very, very good. But I think that if they are detached from the basic research, then the long-term impact could be weakened. And also, Europe has also limited funding, I think, for excellent and basic research. So I really think that basic research is fundamental. So, for example, the ERC program, there was a program that was called ERC Synergy. And I think that focusing the part of the ERC program on AI research could be really very interesting. Another pitfall is that, in all these situations, retaining talents is very difficult. So I know how difficult it is, and I think that also you can agree with me that how it's difficult to retain a very good PhD student or retain a good researcher in Europe. So they in general are attracted by US or China. So we are really in a very bad position for retaining talent, and this is essential for us to grow. And also the last point, the last pitfall is that for me, the access to AI is still very limited from what concerns low-tech users, so small and medium enterprise, because there are still barriers for using AI at large. So some actions, of course, to boot the European strategy on AI and make competitive with respect to US, China, we need to take some action. So first of all, we need to create closer collaboration between initiatives to work toward the same goal. And we have to try to create a favorable ecosystem for retaining talents. Then we really need to align what is the applied research with high TLR with basic research. So really, I think that this is something which is completely missing in the strategy, and we really need to push it forward. Also, basic research can help to ease the access to AI and the broad uptake of AI technology, like for low-tech users, because we need to focus on topics like how to transfer results from one context to another, how to work with small data and not just of big data, because sometimes these big data are not there simply. Explainable AI, the automatic use of AI tools, algorithms, and assets, and also multilingual interfaces that are really needed for low-tech users for approaching AI technology. Then I think that Europe should provide more funding to excellence research and curiosity-driven research programs, and specifically shaping them for AI. And of course, education, as also touched by Carles, is an essential point, and not just educating the students, but also lifelong education and training on the job and so on. So we need to be really prepared for the change. So all these, of course, can be endangered by the current situation of COVID-19 outbreak, because of course, the Commission may encounter some pressure to, and also the member states, governments, to direct the money elsewhere from research into other programs. But I think that this is really risky, it's a very high risk, because I think that really investment in research, and in particular in basic research, are really a long-term play. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michela. Our next panelist is Andrea Renda. He is the head of global governance, regulation, innovation, and digital economy of the Center for European Policy Studies. Andrea Renda has provided academic advice to several institutions, including the European Commission, the European Parliament, the OECD, the World Bank, and several national governments around the world. He is a member of the high-level expert group on AI of the European Commission. Andrea, given your experience, I'd like to ask, what are, in your opinion, the different regulatory approaches on AI in different parts of the world? Have the EU, Parliament, and Commission a clear approach to regulation? Is the approach correct? Europe has taken a leadership role, for instance, on the regulation of privacy with GDPR. Can it take a similar role on the regulation of AI? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Carlos, and thanks to Pere, thanks to Ideas for organizing this very, very interesting panel. And greetings to all the co-panelists whom I've met in various circumstances, and I'm very proud to be part of this discussion together with them. And I look forward to the exchange of views that hopefully we'll have time to have also with the audience later on. I want to also connect a little bit and refer to what has been said so far. I agree very much with the idea of AI's infrastructure that Lorena was proposing before, meaning that one of the mistakes that we have to avoid in trying to regulate AI or trying to develop a policy framework for AI is to really picture a 20th century situation, meaning and adopt a sort of a past generation approach to the regulation of something that is really changing the environment in which we operate. And we perhaps have an anticipation of that in moving so many activities online, meaning having a world in which largely we interact with a representation of reality rather than reality itself. It's something that probably is happening more quickly than we thought. And this is also a frontier that determines a new, a new understanding on what's possible and what's not possible, because it's very much mediated by technology. I mean, you can go back to the early contributions of Lawrence Lessig in the mid-90s in understanding what this new ecosystem of the internet would determine for us, and the observation that on the internet, code determines what's possible. Rather than our muscles, our bones, or the law in many circumstances. So that is very important as we think of AI as a blossoming infrastructure. And the more we look at this, the more we realize that this infrastructure is also made of something else. It's like if we were building a different body to some extent, right? Where the eye is the brain, but gradually we are having the things connected. We are having connectivity being enhanced in a way that, as we have realized also in the discussions in the high-level expert group, in many cases we talk about AI, and if we talk about AI in the more traditional sense of, if you wish, consumer AI, in most cases we're talking about big data, and most of the problems that we attribute to the AI are largely problems that are in the data side. The more we move into next generation AI, and I'll clarify this in a couple of minutes, the more we talk about AI as a combination of the brain and the things. So the AI with edge computing, with the Internet of Things, and the expansion of the possibilities that we will have the moment the number of connected devices will really start to skyrocket, which is in the coming years. So this is very important, because the moment you start working on a regulatory framework for AI, you already have to think about where the world will be in 5 years, not necessarily where the world is today. It's like looking at the starry sky, if you wish. You know that what you're looking is not something that is happening now. What you're looking at is happened a long time ago, and you have to figure out how the stars look today if you really want to know how the universe has evolved. And if you want to develop a good regulatory framework for AI, you need to picture ourselves in 5 years from now at least, and also be sure that we take decisions that are flexible enough and adaptive enough for us to really accompany this process. In my opinion, one of the early contributions that the EU has given to the discussion on AI, also thanks to the high-level expert group, is the fact that any regulatory framework has to take AI in a human-centric way, meaning we have to treat AI as a means, not as an end. And that infrastructure issue is also something that, if we don't approach it properly, can create a number of dangers and risks for us. Because indeed, the question here is not asking ourselves what Europe can do for AI, or even how the EU can be more competitive on AI. The question here is, what can AI do to help Europe achieve its goals and further its projects? And in particular, what can AI do, as Pere was reminding before, to help us achieve the Sustainable Development Goals? And as we move into a different paradigm in policymaking, from the idea of efficiency that Lorena was evoking, of cost cutting, which also can, if you wish, inspire specific behaviors on the workplace, if you wish, on replacing workers with AI, even if this means a reduction in quality. If the reduction in cost is greater, as researchers, for example, Daron Acemoglu and Pasquale Strepo dedicated a paper to this, if the reduction in quality is more than offset by a reduction in cost, we could go for much more automation. If we take AI as a means towards one of the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, achieving full and decent employment for everybody, well, then the answer we give to this policy question, how much automation, is completely different. So it is the focus that is very important in the first place, and how this is backed by evidence and knowledge. It's very important. What we've done at the EU level, I think, is very important, because there was no shortage of ethical principles or values attributed to AI development at the moment the EU started working on this. What we saw as shortage is a couple of things. First of all, nesting the debate on ethical and responsible AI in fundamental rights, in human-centric approaches, and in the law, because in Europe is the place where the law incorporates many of these principles, much more than any other parts of the world. And the other thing that we've done is to move one step forward towards trying to implement an ethical framework. It's not just words, it's not just declarations of principles, it's much more. We are trying now to develop a framework for assessing the trustworthy nature of AI products. And this is where the GDPR reference that you made, Carles, if you wish, comes back into question. I think that what is shaping at EU level is a framework in which we learn the lessons of GDPR by adopting rules that are extraterritorial, by adopting rules that are risk-based, and by adopting rules that to some extent shift the responsibility on and the accountability part on those that develop and deploy AI to ask themselves what kind of risks they're generating for society. And since this might look like a too burdensome, perhaps disproportionate regulatory framework, the attempt and the key attempt of the European Commission, as represented in the white paper that was published on the 19th of February, is to try and differentiate between use cases of AI that generate high risks from the ones that generate medium or low risks. And this is a big frontier, because it requires a dedicated governance. It requires a number of ancillary actions in order to enable an understanding of risk, a classification of risks, in order to understanding what kind of measures could potentially be mitigating measures for risks, and also to understand the final part, which I think completes a little bit the picture to the extent that in this short time frame I could complete it, which is understanding whether this risk-based regulation is something that the EU can sustain and remaining competitive at the same time, or it's something that will be completely outcompeted by countries that maybe are a little bit less cautious in crafting regulation. And this is, I think, where the other element comes in, and we might discuss it later, which is the EU has perhaps done so far its homework on ethical and responsible AI development. It hasn't done fully the homework on research and even the multi-annual financial framework, as Michaela perfectly described. But it also has to do a lot more on building an international alliance on human-centric AI, where like-minded countries at least join forces and create a level playing field, avoiding that we end up in a digital arms race where there will be not enough concern for ethical alignment and protection of fundamental rights. So I'll close there. So that is my little scoring of what the Commission has achieved, perhaps a bit better on the ethics, a lot to do on orchestrating research and providing more money in a multi-annual financial framework, and finally becoming a more proactive actor on the global stage. Thanks, Carles. Back later for the debate.
Grazie, Andrea. Thank you. So finally, we have Eric Badiquet, who is advisor on artificial intelligence for the European Commission at DG Connect. The recommendations of the high-level expert group are aligned with a human-centric approach. Andrea was just mentioning this aspect, a human-centric approach to AI that Ollie also mentioned in the introduction. Is this a genuine European approach, different to those of the USA and China? Are the funding plans for 2021-2030 appropriate for that approach? What has been the reaction capacity of the EU addressing quickly growing fields like AI in recent years, or emergencies like COVID-19? So is Europe prepared financially and strategically to address the AI challenge? Thank you. The floor is yours, Eric.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'd like to join other speakers in thanking you for the opportunity to speak here. So thank you for the questions. I'd like to come back quickly to what both Carles and Lorena, and also the reaction from Michaela and Andrea on the fact that what we need is AI to serve humans, and I think this is also very strongly expressed by the work of the high-level group. But Lorena said AI doesn't understand individuals, and I think it's true. I think we need to really see AI as you expressed it, Carles, in saying empower teachers, for example, in the case of education. We need to see AI as empowering humans, and this is really very important. And I think this is central in the strategy. So your questions on whether we've done enough, and I hear some of the, and I appreciate some of the encouraging comments, but also inspiration for doing more. I think, of course, I will say, because I'm here for the Commission, I'll say we've done a lot. We certainly could do more, but we are working hard on doing this. Of course, given the current circumstances, this is made very complicated. But I think we've been leading in some way. We've been quite strongly leading the discussion and the conversation on AI ethics. We've created, we had this strategy introduced in 2018. We brought together the high-level group. They have done a tremendous work. I think this is very, very well recognized around the world. So I think we've done quite well so far. It's true that in terms of the second part, the excellence part, the funding part, we are not there yet, and COVID and the crisis makes it even more complicated. It was already complicated with Brexit, and now it's even more. So we don't know which way we'll go. I mean, as you know, there's still a lot of there are big discussions on the budget. I mean, you could say maybe this could turn to our advantage, because there is a sense that technology can help, that, and AI in particular. If we're smarter about our data today, we can solve more problems. Maybe there is a way to see it like that, and to say there will be a reinforcement of the budget even. Let's try to take that hypothesis, the positive one. Now, of course, as we know, in these kind of discussions, things can go completely the other way overnight. So there's not much we can say. But what I can say at least is that we are, as you know, we are pushing very strongly. You ask whether the budget for 2130 is appropriate. I think our proposal is quite ambitious. If we reach the 20 billion that per year that we've set as a target, this would be really a tremendous jump in funding in Europe. Now, this is not, of course, we are very far from this, even if we can find the support at European level, because this implies very significant efforts also at member states level. Given where they stand today with their finances, you see what I mean. So this is challenging. Let me just recall what your other questions were that you had raised, and I need to be careful with the time. So yes, on the global picture, I think it's fair to say that, and I think this was said before, it's a very interesting field. I mean, there's not 1 month without a new announcement on an AI strategy around the world. US, China, of course, the main players. We like to talk, or we talk sometimes about a European third way. I don't know. I mean, we would be happy to discuss that, whether it makes sense or not. But it's an attractive way to, it's an interesting way to describe our situation. I think there is some scope there for a third way between, a kind of a top-down Chinese approach to these kind of technologies, and a kind of a more laissez-faire US approach. Although the US now, I think, as was said before, has moved significantly in the past few months in terms of being more proactive on and discussing things more now. Of course, the world is very complex, as we know. There are very different views in the US. If you talk to industry, we've been talking a lot with the big industry in the US. I think some of them are genuinely, interested in putting a framework around AI. Now, of course, they have other interests. They are there to make money as well. But I think there is a genuine interest. For example, when they call for regulation for face recognition, I think they see that there is a huge issue there. And I think we reflect this also in the white paper when we say we will launch, and we are launching a very deep debate there on facial recognition. So we need to see how the situation evolves also in the US. But I think I would agree with Andrea that we've been really trying hard to open some different tracks there to reach or to work towards a consensus that would be as broad as possible around the world. Now, there are interesting evolutions. I think the G20, there was the guidelines from the OECD. That's really, I think this is quite significant. This is continuing with the next G20 meeting. So there are some discussions there. There is the Global Partnership on AI from the French Canadian initiatives that is also, well, it has been struggling to get up to speed, but I feel we are getting there slowly, could play an important role. So I'd like to, I know I don't have a lot of time, but you mentioned also at the end, let me try to share my, maybe we discussed that before, but let's have a little experiment. I'll share my screen and I'd like to show, because that's an opportunity, I'd like to show this slide, which is, we are consulting at the moment. So if our viewers are interested in responding to our consultation, this is where they can go. And I'd like to also wait, because that's a bit complicated. We did discuss the fact that this was a bit difficult, but yes, I just wanted to close maybe with a couple of reflections, because I think COVID is changing our lives these days. So we need to see also how COVID is impacting the future, and both on the dimension of research and excellence, and on the dimension of trustworthy AI, which are the two streams, if you like, as I discussed here, and also in the white paper. So I think first on digitization, on the key role of technology and strategic autonomy, can we say the crisis reinforced the case for tech excellence and strengthening strategic autonomy? I think yes, and this is definitely in line with what the new commission had already started to talk about in a very strong way. I think also this, and we are experimenting every day, this crisis is really speeding up digitization, I could say AIization maybe as well, so a better use of data, etc. So this is going to have a significant impact. And the question is, and this was also raised before, the link with the sustainable goals and the link with the transformation of a more of the society towards more respect for nature and for the environment. I think this is really a key issue today, and we have probably a unique chance. So that's the question: what can we do there to amplify this? Because it's an experiment that we have never done, to stop the economy like this and to restart it. So we can restart it probably in a smarter way. And then to go back to the discussion of trust and data and trustworthy AI. So I think these are the key issues that we are dealing with today, and they are very interesting because they really illustrate all the questions we've been asking ourselves, and the high-level group has been discussing in the past year and a half or two, is whether these big discussions about apps and stuff that we will put together or not to get out of or to control the virus are really having an impact on the way people perceive AI and privacy protection. Have we learned something on bias and quality of training data sets? For example, we are now contributing to a procurement of software that comes from China that analyzes AI CT scans, for example, CT scans of sick people. So there we are having a lot of experience also on what it means to train data on a certain data set, and what the requirements could be, and how prepared we should be for the next crisis. Same issue with data aspects. Is there an impact on our data strategy? I think it illustrates very strongly that we need to work much more on data interoperability, on data pools across Europe and so on, because we see that when we have a big crisis like this, it is key. On international cooperation, we have mentioned that already, but I think this even reinforces the case. And then a question I would have, and I would be interested in the views around the panel, is do we think that this crisis will lead to a higher awareness of privacy-related issues globally? So is this good for our quote-unquote European values and GDPR-like achievements, or will it go the other way? So these are the few questions that I would also have, and be happy to discuss with you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Eric, and thank you to all the panel members. I think there were many interesting points raised. Now we are going to start a debate among you for a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes. In the meantime, please, everybody listening to this broadcasted event, please write your questions either through the, you have here the information again, using the hashtag through Twitter, or you can just use the live chat of the YouTube. Now, just to open the discussion, you can pick up on any of the points that the panelists have motivated you, I would say. One aspect that was not mentioned in the in your interventions is the role of this dialogue between the private and the public world. And this is important in infrastructures. I mean, we all know the problems of having private infrastructures and how that can be limiting to the rights of citizens. And similarly, I mean, where is the public good limit and how that allows for the private interest? So, and this is also a very important ethical question, a very important regulatory question. And maybe I would just throw this question to the panel members to see who wants to pick it up, and then you please continue the dialogue to make it as fluid as possible. Once we finish these 10 minutes, let's say, discussion among yourselves, then we are going to, I will start putting you questions from the audience. So, any reaction?
I can give it a go, Carlos, very quickly, because I think we don't have enough time. Everybody needs to say something. I think in the debate on infrastructure, but more specifically on critical infrastructure protection, which is also adding a lot of elements to this debate, there's always been this problem, how to generate trust between the public and the private sector. Also because an estimated 85% of critical infrastructure is in private hands today after all the big wave of liberalizations. So here the issue is really establishing trust, and the risk-based mechanism is indeed there. How do you establish a way to delegate the big decisions on how to establish a risk governance around AI products? You have to delegate it to the private sector in the very first place, but you need to have strong governance on the side of monitoring and also debate with civil society to make sure that these decisions are not taken in isolation. And just like the European Commission has struggled in the past to establish trusted mechanisms between public and private sectors in critical infrastructure, I also expect this to be a relatively difficult task, but not impossible in the months to come.
Lorena, you wanted to say something?
Yes, thank you. I think right now we have the problem that we have very clearly specified how to protect individual values, but now we come in the friction with a pandemic, which is a public interest or common good situation, which means that there is a legitimate situation to restrict those individual values for the sake of the public health and public interest. And this is indeed, we see that some of the deployments and some of the conversations that we're having right now about the creation of specific apps, whether it should be a centralized model or a decentralized model, whether we should create registries for corona immunity based on a blockchain, which is also happening right now. Those things are gonna change the architecture of our democracies. And we must be very clear, everything, a lot of the democratic architecture that we have now are based on situations either of war or epidemic. The pest letters that we used to get in Venice in the 14th century were letters to permit diplomats and to permit rich people to pass through the frontiers from one country to another without having to do the quarantine. So it was a privilege letter, and this is the precedent for what we now have that is called a passport, which was democratized and given access to all citizens. So it really depends how we build this, whether this is compatible with our democratic structures. And this is certainly gonna change. The things that we change now and the digital apps that we create now are gonna stay there and are gonna shape the way how our democracies go forward. And if we want to protect individual values, we will need to define what the public interest is. And we haven't yet. The common good ideas are quite rudimentary in our normative repertoire. be it ethics or law. And this is something that we need to address also for the sake of individual liberties. And I think that we need to put more and more attention precisely to this conversation about the digital tools that we are creating right now, because it's being done in many of the app developments that I see. It's being done and without sectoral knowledge. It's being done without talking to epidemiologists or assuming that only epidemiologists are the ones that can give an answer. And it's in times of a pandemic, we need a concerted action from very different disciplines, things that the sociologist knows that are not known by epidemiologists. There are also ethical dimensions, and there are many other disciplines that could say and need to do something. So right now, the situation that we have is a lot of myths, for instance, in the creation of apps on the one side, believing that there's a lot of data that we need to really create models of predictions about how the pandemic is developing. While at the other side, we have epidemiologists saying to us, well, no, we need other things. So I think that we really need to have this in mind. We have a situation that requires the knowledge of all disciplines. It's not going to be solved by AI. It's a concerted effort, and we need to do more of this interdisciplinary work if we are to use this type of digital tools.
Okay, Michaela, you wanted to intervene?
Yeah, so I would like to, more than the private-public, relationship, I would really focus on the public one and go back to what Eric said just before. So I think that Europe has really a unique opportunity to concentrate its effort. Beside, of course, the one that are already there, also on something which can be dealt with just with public bodies, so like our environment, sustainability. And so I think that artificial intelligence can really have a unique opportunity to bring an enormous impact in these domains where problems are of a scale and complexity that are way beyond the one that we are handling now. So we really need research for this. And I think that with the Green Deal that is also pushed at the forefront from the Commission, I really think that we have the opportunity here to make a difference with respect to problems that are cover the environment, society, and economy, and all the three pillars of sustainable development. So in this case, of course, we have enormous research challenges. AI can do very much for sustainability problem. And as Lorena was saying, we really have to deal with an approach that is really interdisciplinary, because we cannot think that technology alone can help or can solve all these problems. So we really need to interact with all other disciplines. And I think that the Green Deal is something that we really have to invest on and to concentrate also AI efforts.
Could I add just one word here, Carlos?
Sure.
Just maybe two points. Well, one is I think on the importance of testing and of awareness raising as well. I think there is in some member states there is really a strong emphasis on we need to test. I'm taking again the example of facial recognition. There are several very quite visible tests that have been done, things that have been planned now. I think it's very important also to say we need this space to experiment with things. There is a lot we don't know. This is still a very, very emerging field. The technology, the usage is still moving target. So I think in terms of reconciling the public with an industry, with what are the best solutions, I think this is important. And also in terms of the dialogue or between private and public, I think we should not underestimate, and we keep coming back to this, the power of procurement, of public procurement. So I think we have also there still not exhausted all the possibilities of setting the rule and saying this is what we need, these are the principles that we need to follow, and if you want to sell the stuff to us, we will be first users, but it will have to respect these rules.
Questions are popping up already from the audience, but before we move into answering them, I think Andrea wanted to give a short intervention on privacy. So go ahead, Andrea.
I just wanted to quickly echo what Eric was asking before, meaning what's our relationship towards our own fundamental rights in a moment like this. And my impression is that, as often happens when there is an emergency situation, people become way more flexible and ready to give up their rights in exchange for perhaps enhanced security or perhaps enhanced freedom, right? In the case of terrorist attacks, we've seen quite a big shift in people's relationship towards privacy, meaning people, in particular in France, all of a sudden have become a little bit more willing to give up their privacy in exchange for security, right? And even the laws in the French experience have been going a little bit more into this intrusive direction after, for example, Bataclan or Charlie Hebdo. In a situation like this, we will be faced with the situation of deciding whether we want to give up some of our privacy in exchange for the possibility of going out again, crossing that doorstep. And I think this is very, very complicated. I do believe, as a single statement, I know it's a huge topic. I've wrote a couple of articles recently about this, that the debate on apps that we're having right now is largely overrated, meaning apps by themselves are not going to save us. In most cases, giving up our privacy, also by sticking to the rules for derogating GDPR that are nested in GDPR and also in international legislation, meaning this decision would need really to be motivated by a necessity and in proportionality tests. And I don't think we're there. So I think we are discussing contact tracing apps by ignoring the fact that in most cases they are at best a tiny complement to a strategy. This is largely about testing, about reorganizing society, and about deciding how to move on. So even techies like us, or geeks like us, in these cases, I think probably already think that we are probably overestimating AI or overestimating the power of mobile connectivity and contact tracing apps if we think that they are really going to save us or enable a different way of resuming economic and social life in a context like this one.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Now we will open up the panel to questions from the audience. They are arriving in big numbers, so I will do my best to try and select the most exciting ones or the most controversial ones maybe, but I would appreciate if you could give short answers to these questions so that we can take as many as possible from the audience. There are two questions that I would like to maybe to merge from Jacopo Scipione and Holger Hoss. Is a question about the focus. I mean, there are several countries that are focusing on their own strategy. Jacopo says, I mean, France is the only one that speaks on a common approach to AI. And Holger mentions that what can we do without the United Kingdom? I mean, United Kingdom has been one of the leaders on computer science in general, and AI in particular in the last year. So how can we do that without having the UK engage on the EU-led work? What are the plans for that? I mean, any reactions?
Well, I guess Michaela can also chip in here, but yeah, it's clear that the UK, the fact that the UK has left Europe is a huge blow for AI, for the AI research, because they were the lion's share in a way. So first, I think they are still not very far from us. They have not moved so physically, so we can find ways to work with them. We work very well with all other countries that are not member of the EU. So it's up to us to the UK to define that. And I think there is a will in the research community in the UK to continue to work with Europe. So of course it will make things more complicated. I think some of them were definitely not Brexit supporters, and they were very sad when this happened. But we'll find some ways. But I think it's also a message and a good motivation for the rest of Europe to say, look, the UK was very good. That means we could also, we are good. We have the resources, we have the knowledge, and we can build on it.
Okay, I think that's a good point. I mean, a question from Alain Vigouroux, sorry for my pronunciation. How to control AI applications entering the European market? Is there a need for a European agency responsible for control? Should it be left to the member states? Is normalization enough? So it's, I guess, about regulation, the problem, how to control AI applications. Any reaction?
I maybe could try to quickly comment on this one, but maybe I take two questions together. I mean, on one statement on the common approach, I think I wouldn't underestimate what the EU has managed to achieve by building sort of the coordinated plan on AI with the member states, in a situation in which member states were taking completely different directions. I think we are in much better shape today with the member states, at least on the ethics side and trustworthy AI side, largely aligned. Do we need a EU agency, and do we need to control AI tools that come from the outside? I think these are two separate questions. In my opinion, we will need at some point some form of institutional mechanism or some form of agency, agile as possible at EU level, just because this is a subject matter that evolves so quickly that standardization bodies, or of course, let alone lawmakers, not even think about this, are, you know, these are institutions that are too clumsy in most cases to follow such a breathtaking pace of development. We would need a mechanism or a body at the central level that spreads regulatory certainty by observing what are the evolving industry practices and research findings and solutions, and sort of give guidance on which ones are assumed to be more aligned with the principles of trustworthy AI and which ones are not. There might be a role for certification in the future as well. One of the provisions that are most controversial about non-EU AI, that originally in some documents of the Commission has even been transformed into the idea of only allowing AI made in Europe. And then it was, in my opinion, fortunately changed into an AI aligned to European values or in line with European values. One of the most controversial provisions is the requirement that, especially for high-risk applications, the European Commission might require that AI systems, and evidently machine learning in particular systems, be retrained on European data when they wish to be commercialized and deployed in Europe. And this has been very controversial. I think it's something that would require a lot of experimentation and testing, because it's not easy to see something like this deployed on the ground, but it gives you an idea of some of the potential solutions that we have in a way, in order not to shut the door to non-European products, and at the same time to preserve some degree of sovereignty or control. And just final half sentence, I agree with Eric that we could do a lot more with procurement as well in this respect, by imposing specific conditions whenever at least the public administration purchases AI products.
Thank you, Andrea. There is a question by Nikos Spanoudakis. This is a comment, I think, in general about the directions that government should give into the funding. So the question is, should the governments fund AI research in general, or should they impose restrictions and directions to the researchers? So should the governments and the European Union, in a sense, be directive, restricting what to do, or should it be more general and open? What's your position on that?
Well, maybe I can say something here. I mean, that's of course my opinion. I think that of course there are some programs where you can focus the research towards some applications, some goals, and some topics. But I really think that in all research, in all programs, we need a part that is driven, I mean, curiosity-driven research, blue sky research, which is not really forced in topic, in DEF and in TLR and technology readiness level by the government. So I think that we really need to find a good balance between the two, because of course specific countries, for example, have some specific fields, like in Italy, for example, the cultural heritage is very important, so we need to focus some part of the research on this side. We can have other countries with other topics that are very specific, but I think that we really need to have in every program a part of the funding which is left free, basically. I mean, with no like the FET Open program that was in the EU, or the ERC, that are not targeted toward specific goals. Even if, I mean, AI is very, very broad, so I think that this can be, of course, given as a topic, but it's very, very broad. So, but without focusing on specific subjects.
Thank you very much.
If I may, I would agree with that. I think yes, we do need some. We need to invent the future. We need to invent the future of AI, and for this, we need to give the space to researchers for that. But I think on the yes, we indeed need also a balance there, because we have some very serious issues that we need to solve. And if we can give some motivations to researchers, you know, to address these issues. For example, I'm thinking of explainability, for example. I think this is also very now. Of course, there might be some explainability solutions coming out of Blue Sky Research, but I think having setting some clear lines that this is a priority makes also some sense. So we need to find the right balance, but we also need to find the funding first. Yeah.
Okay. So there is another question that is also recurrent in this kind of debate is about talent. We all know, we all have examples of colleagues that have been hired by big companies with salaries that are $500,000, especially machine learning in recent times. So the question is, what can the European Union do to retain talent? What should be done? Do we have to do anything? We just leave it to the market to decide which large companies hire the best researchers, or can we do something to retain talent? No idea.
I can say something, but maybe Lorena wants to say something.
Yes, I think this is a conversation that we're having, also based on a bit, to a certain extent, also on myths. Formerly we used to have a lot of talent being going to private sector because it's more lucrative. But we see now that there is a bounce back in that regard. We see a lot of people that have been working at big companies and now are backing off and creating their own startups or are trying to go a different way. And I think it has a lot to do also with the intentions behind going to big companies. And it has to do with the fact that developers also want to create and shape. And so I think it should not be underestimated, the value of being able to shape and create things that are constructive, to produce things. And that might have a higher level than a big salary. I think that this is a different type of incentive, but I don't think that you can compete by just trying to recreate the same American market, because we have a different market in Europe. In Europe, we characterize our region is characterized by the fact that we have SMEs. It's what it's mostly constituted of. So if you want to have, considering this landscape of SMEs, the incentives must be different. It cannot be pecuniary. Of course, we need specific political measures to make sure that the markets that we're addressing are the markets that we have. Instead of thinking of the big companies and the big tech that are not in our region, but are shaping our region to a certain extent. But we also need to have in mind that we have all those SMEs here, and that the incentive structures that they need are slightly different ones. But again, I think that we need to think about all the other incentives that we do have in Europe. We have a higher life quality. We have a lot of possibilities of shaping, precisely now, because people are trying and understanding that we need to shape the future. It's not about dystopias anymore, but it's about thinking of what is the democracy in the 21st century that we want to have. So being proactive, and I think there's a lot of opportunities there to offer to talent.
Okay, we have 5 minutes left, so we'll try and put 2 more questions, please, short answers, so that we can finish at in 5 minutes. So there are 2 questions that I would try to merge. One is by Barry O'Sullivan, who is the president of the European Association of AI, and is related to the white paper on AI. And basically, The question is, if the risk-based approach is adopted, what rubric could be used to characterize high-risk applications, uses of AI? This is one question I would like to merge with another one made by Karina Stan from the Developers Alliance, related also to the white paper, saying what is the impact of the coronavirus crisis on the proposals of the European Commission's white paper on AI? So the risk and the impact of coronavirus. If anyone, short answer, please, if it can be. No one takes this one.
Andrea?
I can take it, but of course, maybe Eric will chip in also on the timeline and so on. And greetings to both Barry and Karina. And of course, with Barry, we can continue the discussion because he's the vice chair of the high-level expert group on AI. So we'll continue our conversations on this. There is a problem, of course, in the classification of risks, and the Commission has already outlined the difficulty of basing that taxonomy on, for example, AI techniques or sectors or domains of use of artificial intelligence. The most sensible, the most meaningful way of going for this taxonomy seems to be the one related to the use case. So relatively agnostic in terms of the AI technique behind, but looking at the specific use case and the risk that this can generate in a number of respects. There is an existing framework, and one should not underestimate the fact that the legislative proposal will be adopted under German presidency. In Germany, the Data Ethics Commission has already started this taxonomy exercise. And this leads me to a very, very quick addition on the timeline. It seems that the timeline is confirmed. So this seems that so far there's no impact in terms of the intention of the Commission to delay the adoption of the legislative framework, the legislative proposal. This remains confirmed for the end of this year. So there is an impact assessment that is about to start. It will be a very interesting one. It will take into consideration the results of the consultation that, as Eric was saying, you're all very welcome to contribute to. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Very quickly, a question by Laura Chalens from the University of Tübingen. In light of widespread report of racial and gender bias in technology, tech development needs more intensive engagement with ethics. So we're going back to ethics. How does the EU guarantee, or we guarantee, that amid global competition, time is allocated to ensure that AI is diversity aware and non-discriminatory? An important question and a very short answer, if possible.
I think it starts with our society. I think we need to address a lot of things when regards to technology that cannot be delegated to the European Union. Ethics has a different function to law, and ethics in the very end is something that remains at its core a task of society. It's a societal task. So this means that the European Union can provide the regional framework where we can have this type of conversations, but this is not something that I would merely relegate to the legislator or the executive. It's on us.
Okay, we will just put the last question before we close. By Pere, actually, is about the geopolitical implications of AI. And the question with a preamble says, the US is very concerned about the European strategy on 5G and the support of the Chinese corporation Huawei. How will this affect the future AI technological developments? Do we have the tools to avoid the interference in our democratic principles and preserve fundamental rights?
In how much time?
30 seconds.
I can try to say what I think could be a hint towards answering the question that Pere has, and we can continue bilaterally, of course. My impression is that there is an in the global context, there is an emerging complementarity between the US and the EU when it comes to digital policy. Whereas China is a very self-sufficient environment, The US is discovered to be lagging behind in 5G. And of course, Europe has a problem in the big platforms and applications, also due to the lack of our single market. I think this will have a role in pushing for more transatlantic cooperation in the future. Those complementarities could actually usher into a situation in which US and the EU and like-minded countries such as Canada, Japan, and others might end up cooperating a lot more in the months to come. And the Commission has rightly said, in my opinion, that it's open to cooperation, but not available for backtracking on any of the fundamental rights and any of the values and principles. I think this is the right way to go. And I think we need to engage with those partners with very firm and assertive behavior in this respect.
Yeah, I would agree with what Andrea just said. I think you can hear this very clearly in you know, the new language also from the new Commission, from commissioners, vice presidents, president. So I think we and there is also, as Andrea said, I think there is a will from the US side to have more of a dialogue with us, and I think we're positioning ourselves very well. Now, the problem is, of course, that we have this huge crisis that came in the middle of this, so we will see how this impacts this evolution. But there is definitely more potential for stronger links with the US on these aspects. Yes.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we need to close the panel. It has been an hour and a half already. I would like to thank the panelists for their discipline in their interventions and their answers to the questions. And I would like to thank the attendees for the interesting exchange of views and questions that have been made during the debate. I hope it contributed a bit to the debate on what the EU should development in the development of AI in the EU. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we had a final problem with the text, but with the sound, sorry. So I would give a special thanks to the IDEAS journal that I encourage you to have a look at. They're very interesting papers published in that special issue, and the Catalan delegation in Brussels for the organization. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice day.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.